So I read A Thousand Clowns by Herb Gardner. My first impression was that it was very similar to Neil Simon writing at the time, but research consequently told me that Simon's first successful play only appeared in 1961 and Thousand Clowns appeared in 1962. But they do have an amazing amount of similarities in style, I would say. So maybe it was the sort of thing that was happening in the early 60s on Broadway. One set or a main set with a subset within it, So in the case of Thousand Clowns, it's the apartment, which is a very eccentric apartment that Murray and Nick live in. Ostensibly Murray's apartment, and Nick, his 11-year-old nephew, has been living with him for the short term of 6 years. Which is sort of part of the story. We'll come to that. But so there's this whole thing about a non-fitting character. Non-fitting, I suppose, non-conforming character who wants better. He's a comedy writer. There again, links with Simon. So Murray's a comedy writer who's got fed up of writing comedy. He writes for a regular kids show, and he's fed up of doing the gags for it after so many years. But he hasn't been able to find anything else that he likes. He just wants to do his own thing. So he ends up in an unconventional relationship with a social worker, though she surprisingly moves in after a one-night stand and redecorates, which does stretch the credulity somewhat. But I think if you're watching the play of an evening, you'll buy into it. When you're reading it as a script, you do sort of think, she moved awfully quickly. And it does look like at the end of the play that she's actually moving in and he's going to have a relationship and he's going to conform to his own detriment. And another link it has with the Neil Simon is there's a lot of wisecracking going on. That was why I thought they were from a similar background, with Simon having been a script writer for comedy for quite a while and getting that snappy New Yorkish humour, especially the one-liners and the wisecracks, and there's a lot of those in. But apparently no, although Herb Gardner wrote for comic strip apparently, and that was quite wordy comic strip in the end. So I suppose there's a similarity there, so I can see where it came from, but it's not as close as I was thinking. So I would say it's a play definitely for people who are into Neil Simon, and there are a lot of people in audiences out there who love Neil Simon. And I enjoy good Neil Simon. Barefoot in the Park was always my favourite. Not so bothered personally about The Odd Couple or Come Blow Your Horn. That I was found that, well, watching the film, it was always uncomfortable with the casting in that because, like a lot of films at the time, or things that went on in the 60s and 70s on television and film, this supposedly very attractive single guy is always played by a middle-aged white male, and it's a bit icky. It's that thing which we still don't like. It's that whole thing of pairing up the middle-aged white male with a much younger female, much to her detriment, really. And there is a touch of that in A Thousand Clowns as well, because let me just check her name. Forget her name. Sandra in this, the social worker, she's only 27. Now, he may only be, I think he's only meant to be in his 30s. So that works on paper, but the casting, I don't know how old Jason Robards was when he was cast then, was that typical 1960s, 70s casting. And that always grates with me. But and also it's not great for its representation of the female character. I mean, she is Sandra, a social worker, a child psychologist, obviously highly qualified. She gets put down by the guy she was working in partnership with when they come to see Murray about Nick, because the social service is concerned about why this 11-year-old has been living with his uncle for so long and is not attending school properly and so forth. Although it has to be said, the child is extremely clever, a wisecracking child. But obviously, well, we'll come to Nikki in a bit, but written on a more intellectual level than the others. But Sandra, yeah, she's this highly qualified woman who knows what she's talking about. She gets put down by her boss, and they do have good argument about it. But the trouble is that her route out of it is to have a one night stand with the person, with Murray, with who she's come to interview, and then end up decorating his flat. And that's sort of weird. And it's one of those situations that works probably quite well as a situation in comic theatre when the audience is in watching it and you're there for 1.5, 2 hours. You can buy it, but looking at the script, it's slightly stranger. And the fact that he decides after this very short period to settle down with her as well at the end is strange. Yeah, so Nicky, the nephew, who is much older than he is Nick, I should say, he is a very intelligent child, obviously absorbed a lot of knowledge from somewhere that we never find out where, and is shown to be more mature than his uncle in a lot of ways. Or is he just more conformist? That's something maybe we have to ask ourselves. Murray is searching for something, which a lot of people seem to have been in the 1960s. It's part of that whole movement of the beginnings of an alternative. 62 is early-ish. Although I know things like the Beatniks in the late 50s, and that kind of poetry and artistic movement, but it wasn't in the mainstream, and this was a Broadway success. It's the start of alternative, searching for the alternative, but not being able to make it, which I suppose is maybe what middle class America was about then, I'm guessing. But you look at the films, you look at the literature, you think, I guess, yeah, that's what middle class was about. It was about maybe having your little break, but then going back to normality, which is what Murray does really. He's been away, out of work for 5 months. He hasn't been able to support himself. In fact, he's not even really been going to look for jobs, and he's ideally placed because his brother's his agent. His brother is a very good agent. At least that's one cliche that doesn't go on, is that we don't have the sort of useless agent that comes up with crappy jobs, which can be a cliche that pops up in this type of drama. So he should be onto a good thing, but he just can't find it. And that's why he's in trouble. And he sort of does this whole rebellion thing. Sandra moves in, but he doesn't really want her to. He wants it to be a one-night stand. She wants it to be something more permanent. Then the situation becomes sort of more threatening, or as threatening as a comedy can do, in that Nick is going to be taken away from him completely. And in the end, he gives in, rolls over, and goes back to the same script writing job. And there's this motif that occurs at the beginning, at the end, and it's the soundtrack that you're supposed to have in the play, where it's the sound of the subway train moving and lots of people talking and traffic and sirens and horns and all the rest of it, which is a very clumsy symbol in a way of being in the rat race, but I suppose it's effective. Again, at the level you would expect a comedy of this type to be. I'm not saying it's not funny. There are some very funny lines in it, and I think it would make a good evening's entertainment. It's different when you're looking at a play script to when you're reviewing an actual show itself. And well done. Yeah, you can see this would be a good evening's entertainment. I don't know who would put it on now. I guess it's one for... I would definitely say, if we weren't in the middle of lockdown, that it's for the kind of amateur society that has a full programme of rep throughout the year. So that's doing about 6 shows a year, as a few societies do, and you'd put it in a slot. It occupies a particular slot, a particular comedy slot, that probably occupies the same time every year, because and people who like that kind of American humour, and an audience that's faithful and goes regularly. I couldn't see how it would work now in any of our subsidised theatres. I can't see how it would attract an audience, or if it did, I think people like me would be questioning some of what was going on within it. So I couldn't see it mainstream, professionally, even on the fringe, being any kind of success now. But it's one of those plays that could actually work quite well for an amateur company. That's really where it lies now, because it's not bad writing. It's just the times have changed, and it's difficult to accept some of the premises within it. But not so hard that if you were a regular theatre going audience, it's a good one to go and see for a change and have a laugh and say, right, okay, I'm going to suspend my disbelief. I'm going to believe it's 1962 because I don't think there's any updating on this. I think that would be a mistake. I think, do it as a period piece, do it how it was, and be honest about it. Be honest about its themes and its underlying prejudices. They're not exactly comfortable, but they're not hugely offensive. You just got to accept it for what it is, and it works as that. Anything else, I don't think it's gonna be revived to great success any point soon.